Hello, welcome back to my fave fanfics. Here, I post, well, my favorite fanfictions, if that wasn't obvious. I do hope you'll enjoy them as much as I do. Please like and subscribe for more content. Without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome, my dear faves, to the third part of What If Ichigo and His Family Transported to the World of My Hero Academia. Credit goes to DuchessEglantine. Chapter 12. Hey Kurosaki. Kirishima called as he waved and walked over to join Kazui as they walked to lunch. You gonna train with Bakugo and me for the finals this weekend? Kazui grinned. Sorry Kirishima, my dad's going to be training me every weekend until finals. Man, I'm jealous. Kirishima grinned. Iida and Midoriya have been going on about how impressive he is all week. Kazui ducked his head. Yeah, he's pretty amazing. Kazui had a soft smile across his face. What are you two nerds talking about? Bakugo said as he came up behind them. Coma-man, Kirishima said with a friendly smile. Bakugo scoffed. TCH, much good he is. How the hell are you supposed to be a hero if you're in a coma every other day? Kazui clenched his fists and stormed off with a fierce scowl. Dude, uncool, Kirishima gave Bakugo a disapproving look. TCH, whatever. Bakugo looked away with his arms crossed. Kirishima sighed as he watched Kazui round the corner out of sight. Draw your blade, Ichigo said as he stood across from Kazui in their backyard. Are you sure there's enough space for this? Kazui asked as he looked around. Their backyard wasn't particularly big. It was an okay size, but if either of them did much jumping around they would end up running into things. It's fine, Ichigo said as he waved a dismissive hand through the air. He stood casually with a bakken loosely gripped in his hand. Alright, if you say so, Kazui said dubiously as he brought up his Zanpakuto. Are you sure you want to fight with that? Ichigo raised an eyebrow at the question and put his free hand on his hip. Someone's confident, Ichigo remarked. Zanpakutos cut through bakken easily, Kazui pointed out. Ichigo nodded. That's true, Ichigo nodded, so your goal will be to cut this bakken. That's all? Kazui asked with a pout. Ichigo's eyes gleamed with a faint blue glow. That's all. Kazui Flash stepped in front of Ichigo and swung with a cry. Ichigo didn't move, and when his son's blade met the wooden sword a loud clang rang out through the yard. A shock went through Kazui's arms and he jerked with the pain shooting up through to his shoulders. It had been like trying to cut through a block of solid steel. Your guard's down, Ichigo said, then flicked his bakken at Kazui, who flew through the air and bounced along the ground with the force of the hit. Kazui twisted in the air to land on his feet with one hand digging into the ground. Just how strong are you? Kazui asked as he rubbed his arm. You don't remember? Ichigo's tone was laced with surprise as his eyebrows rose to meet his hairline. I was 7 when you fell into your coma. Kazui pointed out. Ichigo scratched his head at that. No one else told you? Kazui shrugged. They said you won some wars, but no, not really. Ichigo gave him a considering look, then suddenly he was gone. I was the strongest, Ichigo said as he appeared before Kazui as though he had teleported and swung the bakken down. Kazui caught it with his own blade, barely, and the ground beneath his feet collapsed from the force of the strike. Kazui's arms, reinforced with as much Riryoku as he could manage, shook with the strain. His father didn't even look like he was trying. So like All Might then, Kazui thought as he grit his teeth and his legs crumpled from the strain into the shattered ground below him. How could he possibly face that? Do not despair, Ichigo said solemnly as he stood above him, crushing him with what seemed like no effort at all. Keep moving and never stop. Kazui grit his teeth, braced his legs against uneven terrain, and pushed his Riryoku harder than he ever had before. Slowly but surely he began to rise, hard-fought centimeter by hard-fought centimeter, drenched in sweat halfway through what felt like an age, until he was able to throw his father's Bakken to the side. He stood panting, sweat dripping off him from the feet as all of his muscles shook. Ichigo said with his hands on his hips. I think that's enough for now. Kazui whipped his head up. What? Question mark. Quote. It's been an hour, Ichigo said as he turned to walk away. That kind of strain for any longer isn't good for you. He leaned his Bakken up against the wall beside the back door. Besides, Ichigo said as he turned back to Kazui and crossed his arms over his chest. The hell was that Shunpo earlier? Quote. Hey. That was my fastest one. Kazui shouted, indignant. You looked like you were moving in slow motion. Ichigo's image flickered and he had a pitcher of lemonade in his hand and some glasses. Now drink your lemonade and get ready to practice your flash steps. Flash step training lasted until sunset, and by the end of it Kazui was covered in dust and bruises. Ichigo ruffled his hair and gave his a proud smile. You did good kid, he said, and Kazui grinned brilliantly in response. Now go wash up, you stink. Hey. Quote. Ichigo walked in the air as he patrolled Hosu City at a leisurely pace. It was the dead of night, 1 a.m., prime crime time. He had checked a study online. The sound of shattering glass had him flickering down to the street below and snatching the wrist of a large mutated man with a crowbar. What do you think you're doing? Quote. Shit. The man said as he brought out a knife and tried to stab Ichigo. Ichigo spun on his heel and delivered a high kick to the underside of his jaw, knocking him out cold. He fell to the ground with a thud and Ichigo sighed before he hefted the man over his shoulder and delivered him to the local police precinct. Breaking and entering, assault with a knife, Ichigo said to the receptionist as he pointed to the man tossed over his shoulder. Right. The receptionist said, and the villain was quickly secured and taken away by a couple of officers who came out from the back. He might have a concussion, I kicked him pretty hard, Ichigo said as an afterthought. The receptionist nodded and relayed the information over the radio on his shoulder. Hero license number? He asked, and Ichigo pulled his license out of his wallet and handed it over. You knew? Quote. Is it that obvious? Ichigo asked. Most heroes have their license number memorized, he said with a grin as he typed in Ichigo's license information and handed him back the card. Thanks, Ichigo said as he took the card back. The officer nodded. Good luck out there, Coma-man, he said with a smile. Ichigo nodded as he left with a wave. The rest of the night went by pretty quietly. He helped a bunch of drunk people get home safe, stopped a carjacking, and interrupted a mugging. All in all pretty quiet compared to hollow patrols back in Karakura town. That Monday Ichigo accompanied Kazui to school for his appointment with Recovery Girl. Hey Kurosaki. Mr. Kurosaki, Midoriya said as he jogged to join them. Hey Midoriya, Kazui said. Ichigo nodded at the green-haired kid. So I was wondering if you wanted to train together sometime, Midoriya said as he fiddled with his hands nervously with his head bowed. The training grounds are open for students a couple hours after classes, if you want. This kid is so awkward, Ichigo thought as he looked down on the nervous boy that was trying to sweet-talk his son into training together. Kazui seemed to hesitate and glanced at Ichigo. "Ah. That actually works out perfect," Ichigo said, interjecting himself into the conversation. "Recovery girls' treatments have been working pretty well, so I'm up and about earlier. If Kazui stays at school longer, that'll give me time to fit in a patrol and some errands before picking him up." Kazui grinned at him thankfully. "Really? Question mark. Midoriya perked up, vibrating in place with his excitement. "Yeah, sounds fun," Kazui said cheerfully back at Midoriya. Ichigo put his hand on Kazui's shoulder and said goodbye. "See you later, Mr. Kurosaki," Midoriya said with a wave. Ichigo waved back casually with his back facing the boys as he made his way to the school infirmary for his appointment with Recovery Girl. Chapter 13. "I know you're awake," Aizawa said to the prone man on the bed. "He's actually not," Recovery Girl said. "Coma-man does indeed slip into a coma each time he receives treatment," she said with a chuckle. "He won't wake from his coma until a little before lunch at the earliest," she said kindly. Aizawa looked at her with surprise. "Huh," he said, "I'll let Nedzu know." "Does he have Detective Tsukachi in his office?" she asked. Aizawa nodded. "Well, then I hope he has enough biscuits and tea to last the next hour or so," she said primly. Aizawa stared at the prone figure on the bed for a moment before nodding at Recovery Girl and leaving the room. "Honestly, how you managed to get everyone up in a tizzy just laying there is baffling," Recovery Girl said to the unconscious man behind her. He didn't respond, but that was no surprise considering how early in the day it was. Ichigo woke up to Kazui's homeroom teacher staring him down while sitting in a chair backwards. He quirked a brow and covered his mouth as he yawned, stretched, and sat up. He cracked his neck and rolled his shoulder. "What's up?" Ichigo asked as he moved his legs over to put his feet on the ground. "They're waiting for you up in the principal's office. I'll be escorting you," Aizawa said as he got up out of the chair. "What did he do?" Ichigo asked dully as he stood. "Your son?" Ichigo nodded. "Nothing, don't be illogical," Aizawa said as he led Ichigo out into the hallway. "The meeting's for you." "Me?" Ichigo asked, stumped. "Did you forget that you agreed to speak with True Man?" Aizawa grumbled. "No," Ichigo said, "I expected to be told when we were doing it." He grumbled under his breath as he scowled out the windows as he followed Aizawa. Some kids were out doing laps. A purple-haired boy stopped as he finished first and turned his head up to look at Ichigo and Aizawa as they walked past. "Ah, apologies, I thought you were aware of the meeting time." They got in an elevator and Aizawa hit a button that took them up to another hallway. The doors opened on their own when they reached them and the little white principal clapped his hands once and smiled when they entered. "Good afternoon. I'm glad you could join us, Coma-man," Nedzu said cheerfully. All Might nodded from where he sat on a couch sipping tea in a yellow suit with a half-eaten plate of cookies in front of him. Detective Tsukachi sat beside him with a friendly wave. Nedzu sat in a chair at the end and there was an empty couch across from All Might and Tsukachi. "Yeah, no problem," Ichigo said as he sat down on the empty couch. Aizawa sat beside him. "Tea?" Nedzu motioned towards the set in the center of the table. "Thanks," Ichigo said with a nod as he helped himself. "For introductions, I am Principal Nedzu. This is All Might, our heroics instructor, Detective Tsukachi, and Professor Aizawa." Ichigo nodded, and took a swig of the thankfully caffeinated beverage. His sessions with Recovery Girl always left him drowsy. As you know, this is solely a yes-no formatted questioning, so we ask that you do not elaborate on any of the answers you give to the questions asked. Nedzu said as he pulled a tablet from beside him in the seat to over his lap. I understand, Ichigo said as he set down the cup. Now, have you ever been murdered? Nedzu asked. Fuck me, Ichigo thought bitterly. Tsukachi had his own tablet ready, one that would send a true or false message to Nedzu's tablet when he tapped it. No, false. Have you ever been tortured? No, false. Have you been killed more than once? No, false. Coma-man had a nervous look about him. Have you ever been experimented on? No, false. Has your son ever been experimented on? Quote. No, true. Has your son ever been killed? No, true. Have other people been experimented on in the same manner as you have? No, false. Are those other people still alive? No, true. Are you presently under the effects of mind alteration? Quote. No, true. Have you ever been under the effects of mind alteration? Quote. No, inconclusive. Have you ever experienced a state of mind in which you had no control of your actions? Yes, true. Have you ever been affected by a mind-altering technique? No, true. Was the cause of being unable to control your actions a direct result of the experimentation done to you? No, false. Are you still at risk of entering that uncontrolled state? No, true. All Might's shoulders relaxed as he read over Tsukachi's shoulder, and Aizawa's shoulders relaxed as well. He had been watching All Might's body language to determine Ichigo's answers. Is the person who experimented on you still a danger to you? Quote. No, true. Is the person who experimented on you a present danger to your family? Quote. No, true. Is the person who experimented on you alive? No, true. Do you know who experimented on you? No, false. Were you experimented on by more than one person? No, false. Do you know what a nomu is? Yes, true. Do you know what a hollow is? Yes, true. Are a hollow and nomu similar? Yes, true. Are a hollow and a nomu the same thing? No, true. Are hollows associated with the League of Villains? No, true. Are you a villain? No, true. Have you ever been a villain before? No, true. Are you a hero? Yes, true. Have you done hero work prior to receiving your license? Quote. Yes, true. Have you ever been a fugitive of the law? No, inconclusive. Have you ever been a fugitive in Japan? No, true. Are we likely to face hollows moving forward? No, true. Is it impossible for us to face hollows in the future? Ichigo hesitated. No, true. Are hollows as powerful as nomu? Yes, inconclusive. Are hollows stronger than nomu? Yes, true. Do hollows have agency? Yes, true. Are hollows intelligent? Yes, true. Nedzu frowned. The major weakness of the nomu was that they lacked agency and were incapable of higher thinking. The idea that something similar, or rather stronger, lacked those weaknesses was concerning. Do hollows have multiple quirks? Yes, true. Could you be considered a hollow? Yes, true. Are hollows inherently bad? Yes, true. Are you inherently bad? No, true. Are all hollows bad? Yes, true. Ichigo looked frustrated. Nedzu realized he was asking the wrong questions. He drummed his paw on the armrest. Please do not try to clarify, Nedzu said as he thought. Would you be considered not a hollow? Yes, true. Was the process of turning a person into a hollow used on you? Quote. No, inconclusive. Was a part of a hollow put inside of you? Yes, false. Was a hollow put inside of you? Yes, true. Are people infected with hollows bad? No, true. Were you a willing participant in the process that placed a hollow inside of you? No, true. Is the culprit at large? No, true. Is the culprit in prison? Yes, true. Can you tell me who the culprit is? Yes, true. Are you under the effects of an anti-snitch quirk? No, true. Nedzu tapped his paw on the armrest again. Can the hollow placed inside of you get out? Yes, false. Can the hollow placed inside of you take over your body? Yes, false. Yes, false. Has the hollow placed inside of you taken over your body in the past? Yes, true. Can the hollow placed inside of you take over your body now? No, true. Are you dangerous? Yes, true. Are you dangerous to people you do not intend to harm? No, true. Do you intend to harm other heroes? No, true. Do you intend to harm civilians? No, true. Do you intend to harm UA's staff or students? No, true. Are you human? Yes. Inconclusive. Interesting. Is your wife human? Yes, true. Is your son human? Yes. Inconclusive. Does your son have a hollow in him? No, inconclusive. Could your son have inherited aspects of the experiments done on you? Yes, true. Do you have the means to care for your son's condition if he did inherit dangerous power from you? Quote, yes, true. Ichigo turned a candy dispenser around in his hands. I believe that is enough, Nedzu said as he tapped a few things on the screen and set the tablet aside. You've given me much to think about, Coma-man. Ichigo hummed and gave Nedzu a calculating look. Nedzu felt like prey. I'm not going to have some government spoofs crawling around my house looking for something to cut open later, am I? Ichigo asked calmly as he twisted the candy dispenser between his fingers slowly and deliberately. Nedzu's gaze became fierce. Absolutely not, All Might said fiercely. You have my word, Coma-man, Nedzu said with a hand over his heart, that will never happen. Heroes don't make a habit of letting people get experimented on for the sake of research or progress of any sort, Aizawa said seriously. I'll hold you to that, Ichigo said as he popped the candy dispenser back into his pocket. Ishida, Ichigo said over the phone as he lay spread eagle on top of his and Orihime's bed while twirling the memory-altering device disguised as a candy dispenser between his fingers. Kurosaki, Uryu responded. I might be an idiot, Ichigo said. Tell me something I don't know, Uryu responded. What did you do? Quote. I played 20 questing with Kazui's principal, Ichigo said. Uryu sighed. He thinks I'm a rogue lab experiment or something. You are a rogue lab experiment, Uryu muttered over the phone, technically and spiritually. Ichigo rolled his eyes. Thanks, Ichigo said sarcastically. Anytime, Uryu said, by the way, is that you on TV? Quote. What? Ichigo said as he shot up and ran down the stairs to turn on the TV. Channel 23, Uryu said. On today's episode of Dumb Criminals, an unknown hero stops two real geniuses from robbing a drugstore. A loud voice announced as CCTV footage showed Ichigo with blue hair carrying a man covered in shaving cream by his belt like luggage and dragging a struggling woman out the door by her wrists. Ichigo groaned and ran a hand down his face. It was actually pretty funny, Uryu said. I'll be sure to download the footage online and put it in the family album. There's a family album? Ichigo asked. There is now, Uryu said. Ichigo could hear him typing over the phone. You're an insufferable prick, you know that? Ichigo said. And you're an insufferable idiot, Uryu quipped back. The screech of tires sounded from outside. What was that? Quote. I gotta let you go, Ishida. Some idiot's trying to roleplay Grand Theft Auto outside, Ichigo said as he peeked through the blinds at the idiot doing donuts in front of Ichigo's house. Uryu snorted. You have fun with that, he said dryly before hanging up. Ichigo sighed as he stepped outside. Oi! He bellowed as he stormed towards the car with a furious scowl. Chapter 14. Ichigo made his way back up to the attic. He had been going through it little by little every chance that he had, looking for a relatively small black rectangular box that was slightly larger than the average smartphone. He couldn't remember if he had told anyone about it when they had left, and considering the 8 years' worth of dusty boxes he was going through to find it, Ichigo had probably forgotten to. In his defense, Ichigo hadn't anticipated being thrown into an 8-year coma immediately upon arriving here. However, he was at fault for being absent-minded enough not to mention the complicated keto matrix he had requested from Hat and Clogs for holding precious cargo. He set another box aside and got up to set it in the checked stack. On his way, a floorboard creaked under his foot and shifted just enough to give him pause. Setting the box down, he pressed at the corners of the board until an edge popped up just enough for him to pull it up with a bit of force. Under the floorboard were several items they had brought with them across dimensions. All of them looked damaged, including the box Ichigo had been searching for. A pit formed in his stomach as he picked it up and set his thumbs deliberately on 2 unmarked spots. He channeled his reishi into it and it opened with a whir. Inside, the contents were undamaged and he pulled out what looked like a thick bronze sheet with intricate carvings that hummed with Riryoku. Ichigo smiled with relief and ran a finger down the plate. Hello, Kon, Ichigo said fondly. Ichigo sat on a stool at their kitchen island as he worked on dismantling the delicate and complicated matrices of the keto slate. It was mid-afternoon now and he still had a few hours of work left before he could get the contents free. I'm home, Kazui said as he took his shoes off at the door. Welcome back, Ichigo hollered back as he used his finger to move a thread of golden keto. Whoa, what are you doing? Kazui asked as he entered the kitchen. Concentrating, ask later, Ichigo said as he kept working. Kazui hummed and got a glass and some milk out of the fridge. Ichigo moved another shimmering strand and the next sequence bloomed into existence, the previous one fading away. Whoa, Kazui whispered as he stared transfixed on the keto matrix. Ichigo began moving these new threads one by one into the unlocked pattern as well. After a while, Kazui got bored and began to fidget. Don't you have friends to hang out with or something? Ichigo asked as he paused with his finger hooked around a shimmering thread and looked up. Kazui had his head resting on his folded arms on the counter. Yeah, but they're all busy, Kazui mumbled. Ichigo lifted an eyebrow. Everyone is either at Yaoyorozu's studying, training with Bakugo, or Midoriya. What's wrong with Midoriya? Ichigo asked as he tilted his head. That's the green-haired one, right? Quote. Yeah, Kazui muttered. He's being all secretive and cagey, so I'm giving him space. Ah, Ichigo nodded. And Bakugo? Quote. He's a dick, Kazui scowled fiercely. Don't let your mother hear you talking like that, Ichigo warned. What did he do? Kazui averted his eyes and shrugged. He just said some stuff about you, he mumbled. Oh? Quote. I kinda wanna kick his ass, Kazui admitted. So kick his ass, Ichigo said. Kazui's gaze snapped to him. Did you just... ... Give me permission to kick my classmate's ass? Kazui asked wonderingly. Getting your ass kicked for saying shit is an important part of growing up, Ichigo said mildly as he turned back to the Kido matrix. Ah, that goes there. He moved the shimmering thread over to the opposite side he had been moving it originally. Dad? Quote. I love you. Love you too, Ichigo said distractedly as he moved another glimmering thread. Kazui ran out the kitchen and up the stairs to his room while muttering battle tactics. Ichigo paused and stared at the ceiling where Kazui's room was. Quote ellipsis dot. It should be fine, he told himself. There was a knock on the door and Ichigo went to answer it with a yawn. It was already noon, but Ichigo had spent all night unraveling the Kido matrix and consoling Khan, who had wailed at being forgotten for so long. Ichigo had panicked when it sounded like Orihime had been woken up as she had an important meeting first thing in the morning. Luckily she hadn't, but he had wound up sleeping on the couch just to be on the safe side. He hadn't gone to bed until around 4 in the morning. He trudged his way to the door in a red shirt and pink strawberry patterned pajama shorts. No one else was home. When he opened the door, the chief of Hosu police was standing on the other side. Good afternoon, Suragame said with one hand tucked in his pocket. I hope I didn't wake you. Ichigo covered his mouth as he yawned, opening the door and welcoming the man in. It's fine, come in. Ichigo disappeared inside and quickly tossed the blanket he'd been using in the laundry room. Chief Suragame entered the living space at a leisurely pace. You've been pulling a lot of all-nighters lately, Suragame said as he sat down on the couch. Ichigo shrugged. Habit, he supplied unhelpfully. Chief Suragame chuffed a laugh and pulled out an envelope. Ichigo accepted it with a confused look. Your habits paid off, Chief Suragame said as Ichigo opened it slowly. Ichigo's eyebrows shot up when he pulled out a check. A very fat check. I made sure to get the commission to include the hero killer in your pay, since you did such a fine job in expediting the appropriate paperwork. That's very kind of you, Ichigo said as he set the check down on the coffee table. I'd also like to ask for your collaboration on a case. Sure, Ichigo said. You didn't even hear what the case is about, the chief pointed out. Ichigo shrugged. It won't change my answer. I'll hold you to that, Coma-man, Chief Suragame grinned. His grin fell and turned into a serious frown. There's been a slew of missing persons cases, 14 in all. All children, all with mutation quirks. I heard you have a locating quirk? Ichigo waved his hand in a so-so gesture. If I have a good read on their reishi signature, Ichigo said as he leaned forward and laced his fingers. For example, if it's someone I know personally, I will always be able to find them with minimal effort. If it's an acquaintance, it may take me some time to locate them. If it's someone I've only met before a couple times, I have to be in the same city as them and it'll take me some time. If it's someone I've never met before, I might be able to find them, but only if I have a decent amount of residual reishi to work with. I understand, Chief Suragame said with a nod. That's honestly better than I had hoped for. We had been under the impression you could only detect if nearby people were distressed or up to no good. This is much better, Ichigo nodded. I look forward to working with you, Ichigo said with a grin. Chief Suragame leaned forward with an outstretched hand. Ichigo grasped the chief's hand firmly and shook once. Likewise, Chief Suragame said with a serious nod. Chapter 15. Ichigo snuck through the house and tiptoed to the bedroom, peeking his head around the corner to see Orihime stretching in her pajamas with a long yawn. I got you a coconut lime chili mango cottage cheese smoothie with chocolate sauce. Ichigo sing-songed as he showed off the drink with its colorful chili lime candy covered straw and extra whipped cream. Really? Orihime said as she perked up and hopped out of bed. So it's not just her, Kazui said from the hallway. Ichigo turned around with an innocent face to look at his son. Kazui's eyes were narrowed, and he was already dressed in his uniform. You're both sick, he hissed. Kazui pointed to both of them with a serious look on his face. Banned, he said, moving his finger from Orihime to Ichigo, from the kitchen, and walked off. Ichigo turned to Orihime with a shrug. Teenagers, he said, pretending he didn't know exactly what Kazui was talking about. Orihime hummed in agreement as she slurped her smoothie happily. Ichigo stood in a child's bedroom with his Ryotsu carefully contained. He didn't want to contaminate the latent reishi. The kid's mother, who had a koala quirk, stood in the doorway, nervously wringing her hands with puffy red eyes, beside Chief Tsuragame. Ichigo used a Quincy technique to pull the residual reishi into his hands in a glowing blue ball and investigated the Ryotsu signature for well past 20 minutes. Once he felt confident, dozens of spirit ribbons fluttered into existence all around him. The mother gasped and Ichigo's hand shot out towards the ribbon that matched the child's Ryotsu signature. Ichigo's eyes shot open and he held the ribbon loosely in his hand. It floated horizontally in the air, pointing off into the distance. Got it, Ichigo said, and the police chief nodded and handed him a device. You go ahead, we'll track the GPS on that, Chief Tsuragame said. Ichigo nodded, popped it into his pocket, and opened up the bedroom window, jumping out and into the air. Does he always leave like that? The mother asked. Only when he's in a hurry, Tsuragame covered easily. Heroes were typically a rather dramatic bunch. Ichigo soared through the air with the ribbon clenched between two fingers, a frown on his face. The signature felt flighty, and Ichigo pulled at Zangetsu. Once his Shikai was released and the blades rested firmly at his hip, his Shunpo increased in speed by a significant margin. He shot through the air until the ribbon spun around and he turned back. It was a large, unassuming butcher shop. His eyes hardened. He pulled out his cell phone and called Orihime. Ichigo? She asked. I'm sending you my location, bring your hair clips, Ichigo said as he dropped down and entered the back door to the shop. All around him the carcasses of animals hung from hooks. They were exotic. The ribbon pointed directly down. There were 18 different Ryotsu signatures below his feet. What's going on? She asked. I tracked a missing kid to a butcher shop. There's about 20 people in the basement, Ichigo said as he felt the Ryotsu of the child flicker. I'll be right there, Orihime said. Ichigo smashed his leg through the concrete floor, and shunpoed down towards the flickering energy. What he found there would haunt him for a very long time. Ichigo forced his Ryotsu to remain calm and steady, and took out 5 adults. A mix of men and women enjoying a dinner party. Rage filled him and it took everything in him not to let his Riryoku tilt towards the animalistic rage of a hollow. There were children being kept alive with medical equipment. They couldn't afford to have him lose control. That didn't stop him from burying Zangetsu to the hilt in the bastard holding the chef's knife over the char-broiled arm of the little boy he'd been tracking down. The sighs he cast were brutal and bone-cracking. The villains screamed in pain. Disintegrate, you black dog of Rondinini. Look upon yourself with horror and then claw out your own throat. The villains trembled in terror and objected loudly. Geki. He snarled. The Bakudo took hold of them, and they were silenced. He whipped around and hovered glowing green hands over the child laying on the table with a tourniquet on arm and one leg. His little koala face was balled up in anguish, and Ichigo removed the gag in his mouth. The boy bellowed and screamed, and Ichigo pulled out his phone and dialed the police chief's number. This is Suragame. Cannibals, Ichigo spat. I have 13 children who need immediate medical treatment. I have a healer on the way. The boy wailed into Ichigo's chest as he held him close and enveloped him in the gentle green energy of a Kaido. He could hear sirens nearing. I've got you, Ichigo said. I'm here. He rubbed the boy's back as he glanced around the room. The rest of the children were sedated. Many were on some kind of bypass. Ichigo recognized too many machines designed to do the job of organs. These people, Ichigo grit his teeth and kept his emotions bundled. The child clutched at him with his remaining arm. Officers came rushing into the building, and found the stairs that led down to the basement in short order. Zangetsu was screaming, silent to all but him, buried where it was in the man's chest, crying out for blood and vengeance. A younger officer excused himself to vomit into an evidence bag. Ichigo was impressed by his presence of mind to do that. The chief of police looked grim as he walked in. EMTs were swarming around the officers, who moved out of the way quickly. We can't move them. An EMT shouted when an officer went to move one of the children. For all that this place was a house of horrors, it was also a functioning ICU. For a while medical personnel were in and out, some coming to Ichigo to ask if he could assist. Ichigo shook his head. I can't grow back organs, Ichigo said solemnly as he held the koala boy. No, the EMT said softly with slumping shoulders, of course not, sorry. Orihime will be here soon, Ichigo assured them. Ichigo could feel Orihime arriving on her shield. She drifted down through the hole, and gasped with horror before righting herself and getting to work. Ichigo untied the tourniquets on the boy in his arms as the dome of golden light glittered above them. Once the child was fully healed and in one piece again, Orihime moved on to the next child. Chief Suragame stared at Ichigo with open shock. How? Question mark. His voice was soft as a whisper and choked with grief. Orihime has the strongest healing quirk in the world, Ichigo said softly. She hasn't been using it? The chief was confused. That's my fault, Ichigo said. A terrible sort of understanding crossed the man's eyes. Trauma-induced quirk block, the chief said quietly as he looked back at Orihime gratefully. Yeah, Ichigo said as he watched her work. The fear that had been plaguing her of late was missing, and in its place was that old familiar strength. The boy wiggled his fingers and his toes and sniffled pitifully. Ichigo picked him up and set him on his hip, jumping up through the hole and swiftly going outside. Manuel was just arriving on scene, and the little koala boy reached for him desperately. Ichigo handed him over and nodded seriously at the hero, who nodded back as he began consoling the boy. The boy immediately began telling Manuel everything that had happened, and the man listened seriously, hitting a button on his watch to record the testimony for later use. EMTs began carrying the healed children out to the ambulances. There were a lot of tears and screams that day. Ichigo went back down to assist. Each time Orihime finished healing a child they would wake any toxins rejected from their system. Every single child had an animal mutation quirk of some sort. There was even a little girl with a fishtail. She was fascinated by Orihime's fairies and clutched Lily to her chest with shaking hands. Lily, one of Orihime's defense fairies, chatted cheerfully and used large arm gestures to tell a fantastical tale. The other fairies, aside from Shuno and Ayame who were busy healing, did much the same, flittering around the heads of the children who fancied them. Tsubaki was clutched in the tiny fist of a boy with a manatee quirk, nodding along to his blubbering. The officers were unable to move the villains without Ichigo's assistance. "Where should I take them?" Ichigo asked as he lifted the man with Zangetsu buried in his chest. "There's villain medical transport on Persimmon Street," the officer said. Ichigo nodded and brought each villain there. "They have broken bones," Ichigo said to the villain restraint and treatment team as he undid each villain's binding spells. Curses and vitriol were slung his way, and there was much pained screaming. Ichigo pulled Zangetsu out and placed a glowing palm where the blade had been. His heart wasn't in it, so the spell wasn't particularly effective. It would scar badly. By the end of the day Orihime was exhausted and Ichigo felt much the same. She wept quietly on his shoulder as they sat on the bumper of an ambulance with shock blankets around their shoulders. Ichigo had his arm wrapped around her shoulder and a paper cup filled with coffee in his free hand. Manuel came up to them and sat beside Ichigo on the bumper with a heavy sigh and his own cup of coffee. Officers were gathering evidence like a vengeful swarm. Ichigo had spent the better part of the last few hours trying to parse any other Ryotsu signatures from the atmospheric reishi to no avail. The worry was that this was part of a larger operation. The culprits were too well connected and the equipment too advanced and expensive. Considering his experience with hollows, Ichigo should be relatively immune to the idea of people eating other people. But he wasn't. "One hell of a debut," Manuel said casually. "Technically the hero killer was my debut," Ichigo said, sipping at his coffee. "Not you, her," Manuel said as he pointed at Orihime, who pointed to herself. "Who, me? I'm not a hero," she said sweetly. "Yes you are, yes, you are," Ichigo and Manuel said together, out of sync. Orihime sighed and looked out at the mess of people illuminated by flashing police lights. "I quit my job," she said. "Did you like your job?" Manuel asked. "Not really," she said. "Congratulations," he replied. Ichigo bumped shoulders with her. "We'll be fine," Ichigo said. "Yeah?" Orihime asked. "Yeah." The chief of the Hosu City Police bowed low to them at the waist. It was past midnight and they were at the precinct. Ichigo was too tired to react, and his ears were beginning to ring. Orihime waved her hands nervously at him. "Thank you very much," the chief said. "That's not necessary," Orihime said. Ichigo rubbed his forehead as the ringing intensified. "I need to sit down," Ichigo slurred. The room began to swim, which wasn't a good sign. Manuel grabbed him before he fell, resting Ichigo's lolling head against his shoulder and putting Ichigo's arm across his shoulders to support his weight. Orihime was immediately distressed, hovering but unable to do anything. She pulled out her phone and called Uryu. Chapter 16. Breaking news. Later yesterday afternoon, Hosu police collaborated with Coma-man in a case involving a slew of kidnappings involving children with mutant quirks in Hosu City. Coma-man was able to track down one of the missing children, leading them to the exotic meat syndicate, where a group of villains has been hunting down people with quirks of exotic or extinct animals all across Japan. A news anchor with giraffe horns and spots said solemnly to the audience. It is believed that the syndicate is still at large, and all missing persons cases fitting the criteria for being targeted by the villain group are now considered part of the investigation. Pictures of police swarming the butcher shop that morning were shown. An officer looked ill as he carried out a stiff black body bag. Several corpses were found in the building of adults and teenagers with exotic animal mutation quirks. The children were kept in a separate basement facility. The news anchor took a steadying breath. "I'm not reading this," they said as they set the page aside. All of the children were healed with what is now considered the strongest healing quirk in the world, capable of restoring organs, and they took another steadying breath and handed the other anchor the stack of pages, and walked away. A healing quirk capable of restoring organs and missing limbs was used to heal all of the victims found alive within the facility. An anchor with a single horn said, "It is now considered to be the strongest healing quirk in the world." Coma-man is presently in a coma as a result of quirk overuse. Our prayers go out to Coma-man for a quick recovery so that he may rejoin the investigation. The story played all week, and many hero agencies joined in search and rescue. Parent companies, associates, and business partners of the butcher company were raided with a ferociousness that left the villain world reeling. It was one of the largest crackdowns on human trafficking in recent memory. A man with no eyes sat in a chair hooked up several different types of equipment. Shigaraki. "Yes, sensei. I want that quirk." "Yes, sensei," Shigaraki said with a malicious smile. "Garaki, prepare more Nomu. I don't want any mistakes this time." "Yes, all for one." Garaki rubbed his hands together with unholy glee as he gazed upon the smiling face of Coma-man that was displayed on the television behind the news anchor. "He'll be fine," Uryu said as the blue glow faded from his palm. "It's actually a good thing that he's using so much energy. It expends the tainted reishi and makes way for newly produced reishi, which is what mimics the natural frequencies." Uryu pushed his glasses up and pointed a finger up in the air. That natural acclimation in conflict with the tainted reishi is what causes his comas. That's why he's always out after his appointments with Recovery Girl. Uryu finished as he turned to Orihime. "Thank goodness," Orihime said with her hands clasped in front of her. Uryu put a hand on her shoulder. "You did great, Orihime, and Ichigo's getting even better," he said softly. She looked at him and smiled brilliantly. "Yeah. I'm kicking your ass for using Shikai," Uryu thought menacingly towards Ichigo's prone form. "You reckless fool." His glasses glinted. Orihime remained oblivious. Finals was a few days away, and Kazui lamented that he wouldn't be able to train more with his father before the tests as he made some tamagoyaki for breakfast. There was a squeak behind him and he looked at the door. A little lion plush stood in the doorway. Kazui stared at it in shock, and the lion plush fell down with a flop on the floor. Kazui slowly crept towards it and poked it with his foot. It squeaked, he jumped back with a yelp. His mother came down the stairs and stopped in the doorway. "Is something wrong?" she asked him gently. Kazui pointed at the plush animal. "Did you throw that down the stairs?" he asked, freaked out. Orihime looked at him like he'd lost his mind and picked up the plush toy. "Who, Kon?" she asked as the toy hung limply in her hand. "Don't you remember Kon?" she asked. Kazui shook his head. "He was your best friend," she said helpfully, placing the toy on the counter. It lay there motionlessly. Kazui poked it with the handle of his spatula. It squeaked. He narrowed his eyes. A farting noise sounded by the stove and Kazui whipped his head around to find his mother squirting 2 bottles on his now plated tamagoyaki. "Mayonnaise and chocolate sauce." "Mom," he said, taking the can of salsa out of her hands. "I'm good, thanks." Kazui sat in his seat with a heavy sigh and a stomach ache. He had scraped the chocolate sauce off the best he could, but there was still the lingering taste of it on his breakfast that morning. "Good morning, Kurosaki," Midoriya said as he walked by. "Good morning, Midoriya," Kazui replied. "TCH, nerds," Bakugo sneered. "Dick," Kazui said bluntly back. The class went quiet and Bakugo stared at him with a surprised look. Mr. Aizawa entered the classroom and Bakugo glared at Kazui fiercely. Kazui made a face back at him. "If you're quite done," Aizawa warned from the front of the class. Kazui ducked his head and opened his bag to get his review notebook out along with everyone else and froze in horror when he opened it. Kon stared back at him. "Is that a damn plush toy?" Bakugo said with disbelief. "Shut up," Kazui grumped as he pushed the toy to the side and got out his notebook. Bakugo gave him a perturbed look and got his own supplies out for review. When the class was over, Kazui went to put his prep notebook back and froze again when he opened the bag. Kon was gone. He looked under the desk and turned his head around to search for the toy, then looked over to Bakugo. "Did you actually steal a plush toy?" Kazui asked flatly. Bakugo sneered at him. "No, keep your weird nerd shit to yourself," he snapped back as he swung his bag over one shoulder and stomped out of the room. "Lose something?" Sue asked as she walked over to his desk. "Yeah, a little lion plush. My mom put it in my bag this morning," Kazui said. "Why'd she put it in your bag, Ribbit?" Sue asked with a hand by her mouth. "No idea," Kazui shrugged. "I'll let you know if I see it," Sue said as she waved to Jiro when she called out to her. "Thanks," Kazui said. Zero wrapped an arm around his shoulders as they made their way out of the classroom. "You eating lunch with us today?" he asked. Kazui shook his head. "My dad's in Recovery Girl's office today, so I'm going to eat it there." Zero frowned at that. "I heard what happened on the news, is he alright?" Zero asked as they walked together towards the cafeteria. Kazui hesitated. "He's... recovering, but he should be fine," Kazui said with a frown. They got in line to pick up something from lunch rush. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope he gets better soon," Zero said with a concerned look. "Yeah, me too," Kazui said. "I'm sure things will turn out just fine, Ribbit," Sue said optimistically as she picked out her own lunch. Kazui grinned thankfully at her. "Thanks," he said. When he made his way to the infirmary where his father lay, well and truly unconscious, he saw it. Kon was laying on his father's chest. Kazui walked over to it, picked it up, and shoved it in a supply closet. He waited with his breath held and his hand pressed against the door, then turned around. Kon was sitting upright on his father's chest, and then fell back as though he were a puppet with his strings cut. "Hua!" Kazui jerked back with a hand to his heart and wide eyes. Chapter 17. Sato helped Orihime register herself as a consultant under the Kurosaki Hero Agency. From there she worked as a consultant on the butcher case in Ichigo's absence. She wasn't a registered hero, so she couldn't participate in combat or be on scene, but she could use the healing aspect of her power or quirk as a registered consultant under the permission of Coma-man to heal the victims and involved heroes. In the event she were to abuse her privileges, Ichigo would be held responsible. It was all very bureaucratic. Kazui's principal offered to allow Ichigo to stay on campus in a room off to the side of the school infirmary while he recovered, as he wasn't able to get to or leave his appointments under his own power anymore, to keep him out of the public eye during his recovery. Orihime accepted gratefully. "If there's anything I can do to repay you, please let me know," Orihime offered as she walked down the hall with the little principal. "Are you quite sure?" he asked tentatively. "Uh-huh. Anything at all, I'm happy to help," she said cheerfully. "Well, there is something, but the matter is quite complicated and I would need to get the other party's consent before divulging information. Would you mind waiting?" Nedzu asked. "Not at all," Orihime said as she shook her head. "That's very kind of you," Nedzu said with a happy smile and a flick of his tail. Aizawa stared dully at the two teenage boys at each other's throats. This had been the third instance this week, and finals were fast approaching. He had originally intended to have Bakugo and Midoriya together to teach the valuable lesson of working with heroes you may not necessarily get along with. However, Bakugo had seemed to get over whatever it was he had against Midoriya, and instead he and Kurosaki were at each other's throats. He rubbed at his eyes and sighed. Problem children were multiplying. The longer time went on with Bakugo not getting it through his thick skull that heroes were measured by more than just the strength of their arm, the more problems they'd have down the road. Kurosaki had recently gained a dramatic increase in physical ability and confidence and was outperforming everyone in class. He suspected the father was to thank for that. Bakugo didn't like being anything less than the best at everything. It was a troublesome attitude and difficult to stamp out of hero hopefuls as tenacious and stubborn as Bakugo. "Sigh," Kurosaki shouted as he pointed his hand palm facing Bakugo. Bakugo's arms snapped behind his back and he met a mouthful of dirt. "I'll kill you," Bakugo roared as he spat gravel out of his mouth. "That's enough," Aizawa said firmly as he walked towards the two purposefully, his hair floating in the air. The moment he was free from Kurosaki's quirk, Bakugo launched himself at Kurosaki. Kurosaki pulled off a rather advanced judo move with impressive speed, which resulted in Bakugo meeting another mouth full of dirt. This time with Kurosaki sitting on his back while pegging his arms to his sides with his legs. "I said enough," Aizawa said. Kurosaki's newfound confidence was a wonderful thing to behold. It was also a major pain in his ass. "Problem children," Aizawa growled as he lifted each boy by the neck of their blazer like a couple of unruly kittens. Ichigo woke up sluggish, like he was under the effects of Kenpachi's Ryotsu. Without the Ryotsu, it made him feel old, and he was immediately reminded that he was 8 years older than he remembered being. "I'm more than 30, Ichigo said to the ceiling above him. Some time passed before he could muster the energy to sit up. He heard a boom off in the distance and looked out through the window. Kazui's Ryotsu was over there. He should probably go check it out. Ichigo groaned as he stood up, grabbing the blanket from the bed and wrapping it around his shoulders. He had a pulsing headache to boot. He made his way there slowly, across several large campus grounds. Kazui didn't seem to be in any particular danger. Some kid's face popped up out of the ground. The first years are taking their final exams, the blue-eyed blonde-haired ground face said chipperly. What the hell? Ichigo muttered with bloodshot eyes as he held the blanket around his shoulders and stared down. No matter how he looked at it, his brain couldn't make any sense of what he was seeing. You look tired, the ground face told him. Thanks, Ichigo said as he continued walking forward towards the explosions and Kazui's ryotsu, leaving the ground face behind. A young man in the school's uniform jogged up to match his pace. His face was the same as the one in the ground. Parents typically aren't allowed to watch their kids take their finals, he pointed out. Ichigo paused. You're right, Ichigo mumbled. Another boom sounded, and he kept walking. Finals don't typically include explosions, the boy matched his pace. Should you be out of bed? He asked with a measure of concern that made Ichigo feel infirm. Probably not, Ichigo said moodily as he kept walking. His bare feet covered in a layer of dust now that made him itch for a shower. They made it to the testing grounds and Ichigo stood outside the open gate with a scowl. They have to make it through here, the boy said. They're facing off against the teachers. Ah, Ichigo said as he stood there, shouldn't you be taking your tests? Quote. I finished mine. He said cheerfully. Ichigo said, wandering off to sit against a tree. The boy followed and sat next to him. I'm Tugata Mirio. He said cheerfully with an outstretched hand. Kurosaki Ichigo, Ichigo said as he reached out and shook the boy's hand firmly. I saw what you did on the news, Tugata said calmly as they watched a building shake in the distance. Which thing? Ichigo said blandly. Tugata laughed. Yeah, I guess you have been on the news a lot lately. Ichigo grunted and covered a yawn. Tracking down that kid and busting the butcher ring, he said solemnly, it's a really impressive quirk. Not a quirk, Ichigo said. What? Tugata said with a shocked look at him. Ichigo didn't respond. Tugata stared. Another building shook. Ichigo relented. It's a skill. Anyone with a soul, enough intelligence, and decent work ethic can figure it out. Ichigo used his fingers to count, or be taught, whichever. That's amazing, Tugata said with a wondering lilt to his voice. Ichigo shrugged. I'm actually not that good at it. I got a lot of crap for taking so long to figure it out, Ichigo said as they watched a building fall. Kazui's ryotsu was steady, if a bit pissed off. Could you teach me? Tugata asked. Ichigo looked him up and down. Catch my fist, Ichigo said. His arm shot out like a rocket and Tugata's arms shot up to grab his fist in a blur, catching his forearm instead. Tugata's arms shook and sweat beaded down his temple. The gleam of resolve in Tugata's eyes was familiar to Ichigo. He pulled his fist back. Yeah, sure, I'll teach you, Ichigo said nonchalantly. Tugata perked up with a brilliant smile. I'll do my best. He pumped a fist. Ichigo snorted with a tiny grin. A blonde kid shot through the gate like he'd been punted by a Manos Grande and crashed into the tree beside them with a splutter. His head shot up and he spat out dirt. The gate lit up with a cheer and a little jingle with confetti. I didn't need your help. He bellowed as he made to go back in through the gate. Isn't the objective to be on this side of the gate? Ichigo asked the kid blandly. The kid whipped his head around to stare at them. Then he folded his arms across his chest and pouted. Or scowled, Ichigo counted it as a pout though. TCH. The blonde kid turned his head away and brooded. Ichigo and Togata share a look. Chapter 18. Ichigo signed Kazui's permission slip to go to summer camp with his school. He had planned to train him over the summer break, but Ichigo's use of Shikai had come with an extended recovery period, and it would be a good experience for Kazui regardless. Thanks, Kazui said as he slipped it into his bag. Kazui stopped and pulled Kon slowly out of his bag with a dead-eyed stare. Dad, Kazui said. Yeah? Quote. I think the doll's an animatronic spying device, Ichigo snorted. Kon's haunted, Ichigo said as he took a bite of his breakfast. Kazui looked at him. But there's no such thing as ghosts, Kazui said with narrowed eyes. Ichigo choked on his coffee, the beverage leaking out of one of his nostrils and his eyes tearing up at the burn of it. Huck, cog. Ichigo bent over and banged on his own chest with the palm of his hand. Kazui whacked his back. Is everything alright? Orihime asked as she walked in. Mom, Dad thinks ghosts are real. I think he needs therapy, Kazui said seriously. It was probably the butcher case that tipped him over the. Kazui went on a lovely little rant about post-traumatic stress disorder and its effects on the human psyche in relation to believing in the supernatural. Ichigo put his chin in his hand once he stopped coughing and stared at Orihime while Kazui went on in more detail than Ichigo honestly expected from a 15-year-old. I don't even know what to say, Ichigo told his wife. From then on Kazui left little pamphlets to reputable hero therapists laying around the house. Ichigo soared through the air with Togata fast behind him down below in the city streets. It was the middle of the night, Kazui was at summer camp, and Togata had turned down a work study at another agency to learn what Ichigo could offer. Ichigo took his training very seriously. Togata's cape had been left at Ichigo's house to cut down on drag. His assignment was to track down Ichigo no matter where he was in the city. Ichigo would sometimes be up in the air and flicker to random nondescript alleys or on top of buildings, sometimes in the middle of a highway. They were also performing hero duties as they went. Drunk drivers, back alley assaults, late-night accidents, and cries for help were all answered by the duo throughout all of Hosu City. Ichigo pushed Togata hard, until he was unable to use his quirk any longer and was left panting and shaking in an alley. That time Ichigo found him. Can you feel the flicker? Ichigo asked as he stood with his arms crossed at the mouth of the alley. The flicker? Togata asked as he panted, drenched in sweat. Ichigo nodded. That little flash when you go to use your quirk. Your Riryoku is what activates it. The flood of power when your quirk activates overshadows it, but there's a brief moment there where your Riryoku moves independently of your quirk. Try to use your quirk now, and pay attention, Ichigo said seriously. Togata panted with wide eyes and then nodded seriously. He closed his eyes. Ichigo waited patiently. Togata's Riryoku moved in a way it hadn't before. That's it, Ichigo said, now memorize that sensation. Everything I teach you will be through that sense. Togata nodded, a little gleam of excitement shining through the exhaustion in his eyes. They turned in after that. Togata was using the guest room at the Kurosaki house while he trained with Ichigo. Take him, Ichigo said as he handed Togata a plush lion. Togata took it with a confused smile. Are we going to be working with children? Togata asked as he tucked Kon into his belt. Maybe, depends on what the day holds, Ichigo said with a shrug. Just make sure you keep him safe, Ichigo said while looking at Kon. Yes sir, Togata said. Kon hung limply pinned in place, discreetly leaning away from Togata's crotch. Kon hated being pinned in the front side hip belt location. If you're going to put me in your belt, put me at the side. The far side. Kon thought furiously. Alright, let's head out, Ichigo said. Today's going to be harder since I won't be leaking my Ryotsu as much. Try to spread out your Riryoku without activating your quirk. We won't be moving as fast today. Got it. Togata brought his cape today. Ichigo stuck with a V-neck and some comfortable jeans. It took 2 weeks like that, following Ichigo around as he decreased his Ryotsu output day by day for Togata to notice. He held Kon in his hands with an astonished look. You're alive? He asked. Kon perked up and made a peace sign. You got it. Kon said cheerfully. Good job, Ichigo said as he hopped down from the roof of a nearby building. If you can sense Kon, then you can sense just about anyone. Togata looked up from Kon to Ichigo. Now, Ichigo said, we're going to work on techniques. Togata grinned and set Kon on his shoulder. Kon sat comfortably and hung on to Togata's ear. Ichigo and Togata sat side by side on a park bench, watching some kids run around and play. Ichigo had Togata watching the kids with his eyes closed. You know how to track a powerful Ryotsu of someone you're familiar with. Now try telling a bunch of weaker ones apart. It was great practice, and felt like having a second quirk. Hey, Mr. Kurosaki? Togata asked. A couple of birds twittered by and a cicada chirruped in the hot afternoon sun. Yeah? Quote. Why'd you decide become a hero? Togata opened his eyes to gauge Ichigo's response. Ichigo stared out at the kids playing. I'm not arrogant enough to think that I can save everyone, Ichigo said, but I'm not humble enough to say I'm content with only what my 2 hands can carry. A cloud drifted past and Ichigo's hair was illuminated in speckles from where the sun peeked through the branches of a tree as he met Togata's eyes. I want to save an ocean's worth of people, Togata grinned. I feel the same, Togata said calmly as a breeze passed them by. Orihime was walking home with a bag in each hand for dinner that night. She hummed a cheerful tune as 2 bottles clinked when she stopped for the crosswalk. A breeze passed through her hair and a nondescript van stopped in front of her. The door slid open and a man with his skin stapled together stepped out. Hey there pretty lady, he said with a smile, you're coming with us. Orihime tilted her head to the side with a finger tapping her lip. I am? She asked. Her shun Rika flittered into existence around her. I don't think so. Look, I don't want to rough you up lady, Dabi said. But the boss is real interested in that pretty little quirk o' yours. So do us a favor and just come quietly. No one has to get hurt. Kon hopped out of her grocery bag onto the sidewalk with an accusatory paw pointed at the villain. No pervs allowed. He shouted. Dabi looked coldly down at the little doll and his hands blossomed into blue flames. A man in a top hat snuck up behind Orihime and her shield bloomed between him and her. What? Question mark. Compress said in shock as his quirk was blocked. TCH, Dabi said as he prepared to throw flames. Khan inflated into his giant muscular form and punched Dobby and the van away with a squeak. "What the hell?" Question mark. Dobby shouted before being flung away with the force of the strike. Khan slung Orihime over his shoulder and ran. "The groceries." Orihime cried. "We'll order out." Khan shouted. "I'm afraid you won't be going anywhere," Kurogiri said as he opened a portal directly in front of both of them. Khan abruptly redirected and leapt high into the air with a roar. Kurogiri's eyes widened in surprise. Khan leapt from building to building towards Ichigo as fast as he could. Unfortunately, this part is over. I hope you enjoyed it. My apologies for all those quotes. Please have a good morning, afternoon, evening or night. See you next time, faves.